Welcome back, guys. We got $400 cash in hand and we're going to pick up a 1997 Suzuki RM250 with no spark, but has a title. The seller seems firm on his price, but we're going to run some tests and maybe we could work him down a little bit. And as a spoiler, I ended up making $350 profit on this bike. So if you want to see the process of negotiating the purchase and maximizing the value at sale, stick around to the end. So the first step is to check compression, as will give us an idea of the health of this engine, and after multiple tests we only got 25 psi. Now in the shop I was able to run this test again and get 50 psi. As it turns out, the throttle cable was not opening up the carb on this initial test, but either way this bike needs a top end rebuild. The next step is to test electronics. My camera died during these tests, but I ran them again in the shop just for this video. Starting with the stator, we were able to see that the ignition coil is just barely out of spec at 30.9 ohms, and the pulse coil is good. Since the ignition coil on the stator is barely out of spec, I'm calling this whole part good enough. Connecting up the stator to the CDI and testing for crank voltage to the ignition leads, we were able to see that we're getting no juice out of the CDI, confirming the seller's belief that this was a bad CDI. This is a tough loss, as a new CDI goes for $200 or more. The last to test is the ignition coil, and we were able to see that the primary side tests good, but not the secondary, even with the spark plug cap off. This is a $12 part, so not really a big deal. So since the listing already claimed that it had no spark and a bad CDI, that wasn't really anything to negotiate with, so I used a compression test to negotiate the bike for $320. Now let's clean this bike up and list it for sale. Now I will admit, as soon as I bought this bike, I found a deal involving a trade for my 83 XR500 plus some cash for a 1998 RM250 in working condition and with the title. But when that deal fell through, I found myself thinking about keeping this RM and just rebuilding it. So I took the listing down and decided to check out the internals to see if this bike needs more than the $450 I estimated. So I drained the fluids, with the coolant being the trickier one due to a stripped drain plug, and everything checked out nice and clean. This suggests no mixing and a working water pump seal. On these bikes this is a big deal because to service this you need to split the cases. Then I checked the crank seal on the stator side and there wasn't any significant oil, so I'm calling the crank seal good. Pulling off the cylinder head revealed a perfect head, and the cylinder looked pretty good as well. Now for the make or break moment of the crank, and it feels good with no up and down play. Upon initial inspection of the piston, it seemed like the rings may have been stuck a little, and there was some scraping on the piston, but overall extremely minor with no big signs of blow by on the rings. The reeds also looked pretty good. Overall, with a new top end and spark back, this bike should be a strong runner. As the bike checked off each box, I leaned more on the side of restoring it for myself, but then in a turn of events, the deal for trading my XR500 plus cash for a running 98 RM250 was back on. So I relisted this bike to see if I can make an easy $300-400 of profit with no work, and if no one wants a project, then I could spend my time getting the bike running for a profit of about $400 to $500. And after 24 hours on the market, I had it sold with pickup next day for $700, locking up $350 profit. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time when we finish the restoration on this 1984 IT200.